For centuries, Indigenous women and girls have been silenced, but now their voices rise as this is the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. This is their story. The roots of this crisis run deep in history, starting with settler colonialism as European colonizers sought to conquer land and erase Indigenous identity, displacing entire communities, forcing assimilation and silencing traditions. Between 1492 and 1802, up to 74% of the Indigenous population in the Americas had been wiped out. Indigenous lands were stolen, languages forbidden, children were taken to boarding schools to strip away their cultures and identities. The lasting impact of colonization continues to harm Indigenous communities, with systemic racism reinforcing injustice towards minorities, influencing every part of Indigenous life. Deeply embedded in laws, established beliefs, and societal attitudes, systemic racism impacts healthcare, education, law enforcement, and economic opportunities. Indigenous people are disproportionately and constantly targeted by discrimination fueled by racialized stereotypes, leading to biased policing, political disempowerment, and systemic neglect.
We have seen Native women go missing and murdered at astronomical rates, but despite knowing this within our communities and having the stories, we see an underreporting of them in the data, which makes it harder for us to advocate for and to show the disparity that exists in our communities and the loss of our loved ones.
Tell me why that underreporting is happening. What part of the system is failing?
In 2018, my organization put out a report in which we found that law enforcement agencies were either not collecting race and ethnicity of victims. We found database systems that would default to white if race and ethnicity wasn't collected, or they would visually look at somebody and decide what their race and ethnicity is. And as a result of that, we are finding a complete underreporting. And in fact, I've actually seen Native families having to fight to have their young relatives classified correctly because somebody mistook them for another race and they weren't reported as American Indian or Alaska Native. It's a systematic problem, and as a result of that, we have all of the stories of our communities, but we fight to show it in the data.
Tell me about what you hear from families about their missing loved ones, their murdered loved ones. What kind of stories do you hear from them about the issues they run into in reporting this and in getting justice?
We often will hear stories of individuals who attempt to report their loved ones missing, and officers will tell them, well, maybe she just ran away. Was she out drinking? Does she do sex work? We see the prejudices and stereotypes against Indigenous peoples and people of color play out in the underreporting because nobody's listening to us. We also see a maze of jurisdiction that exists only for Indigenous peoples in this country because of the laws that exist on tribal lands. I worked with a family where they actually spent 3 days of law enforcement trying to decide who had jurisdiction. And in that 3 days, their loved one remained missing and nobody was looking for them.
For generations, this has been their reality. Indigenous women especially have long cried out for justice in missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls cases, and their human right to feel safe within their own country and communities. In 2010, the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls movement gained attention following the murders and disappearances of Indigenous women in Canada. In British Columbia, Canada, a section of the Yellowhead Highway 16 is referred to as the Highway of Tears. On this highway, many women who are mostly Indigenous have disappeared or been found murdered. 23 First Nations border this highway. Due to poverty and a lack of public transportation, many locals resort to hitchhiking as a form of transit, making them vulnerable to predators. Countless women have disappeared without a trace. For decades, their cries for help went unheard. Due to the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls movement, the Red Dress Project was created by Canadian artist Jamie Black. Red dresses were hung in public spaces to display the lives that have been lost due to the violence of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Each red dress represents a woman who was stolen from her family, her community, and the world. Red symbolizes their resilience, their strength, and the blood that has been shed. This crisis is not just in Canada. In the United States, Indigenous women face violence at an alarming rate. In 2023, Native American and Alaskan Natives only made up 2.92% of the total population of the U.S. However, Indigenous women are twice as likely to experience violence compared to other demographics. 1 in 3 Indigenous women is sexually assaulted during her life, and 55.5% are violently assaulted by an intimate partner. Murder is the third leading cause of death for Native women. And yet, in 2016, of the 5,172 cases of missing American Indian and Alaskan Native women reported, only 116 were recorded in the Department of Justice's database. As of 2018, there is no database system in the U.S. that tracks how many Indigenous women have been abducted and murdered. Jurisdictional gaps have served as a barrier to deliver justice to those who have fallen victim. When the offender isn't a tribal member, they fall under federal jurisdiction. According to the Urban Indian Health Institute, perpetrators were 83% male and approximately half were non-Native. These are not just numbers. They are daughters, sisters, mothers, and friends. They are loved, they are missed, and they deserve justice.
Activists like April Ignacio, a Tohono O'odham activist, have refused to let this crisis be ignored. When government officials had no answers, she began documenting cases herself. She has spoken with many people who have gone through the hardship of losing a family member or friend, and even after years, it is hard for those small communities who have lost someone and have gotten no answers to know where or how they disappeared. Her work has led to Arizona's House Bill 2570, ensuring that missing Indigenous women and girls are no longer erased from official records. In 2017, Savannah LaFontaine Graywin, a 22-year-old Indigenous woman, was murdered while 8 months pregnant. Her case highlighted the failures in law enforcement responses, leading to the passage of Savannah's Act in 2020. This legislation aims to improve coordination among law enforcement agencies to prevent more tragedies. Jurisdictional challenges at the southern border make justice even harder to achieve. With multiple police agencies in charge, no one knows who is responsible. Tribal police are limited in their power. They cannot arrest non-Native perpetrators, even when crimes happen on tribal land. The system is broken, and Indigenous women pay the price. But Indigenous communities are fighting back. Rallies, marches, and events like the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women National Day of Awareness on May 5th shine a light on this crisis. The day calls for people to demonstrate solidarity with the family and tribes that the victims are a part of, and to honor the lives of those who have been missing or have been murdered, whether their cases have been documented or not. The University of Arizona holds events that raise awareness to the movement, such as the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Symposium, which brings together many tribes, local agencies, and perspectives speaking on the issue. In 2023, Tucson became the first U.S. city to establish a Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Task Force, bringing together tribal, state, and federal law enforcement. With this, they are trying to give answers, take accountability, and address this crisis that is going on in our community. This is a step forward, but more must be done. Indigenous women and girls must no longer be ignored. They are more than just statistics. They are loved, they are valued, and they deserve justice. No more stolen sisters.